Hello and welcome to this special online edition of Colonial Crossfire. I'm Andrew Desiderio. Tonight we'll focus exclusively on the Democratic race for the White House, with two student panelists representing each of the candidates. This year's Democratic primary was expected to be smooth sailing for Hillary Clinton, as nobody really expected a viable challenger. Well, in comes Bernie Sanders, the Democratic socialist from Vermont, who has complicated Clinton's seemingly easy path to the nomination. Now, Clinton is still favored to win the Democratic nod, due in large part to her support among superdelegates, the party insiders who can cast their vote for either candidate. But Sanders pulled off a surprising win in Michigan, leading many to reevaluate his staying power in this race. It's now mid-March, and recent presidential debates have exposed sharp divides between the two candidates on a wide range of issues. Tonight, we will explore them with our student panel. Supporting Hillary Clinton, Brenna Carroll joins us. Brenna is a freshman from Highland, Indiana, majoring in history, and is the social media director of Colonial's Demand Action. And representing Bernie Sanders is Keiko Suboy. Keiko is a sophomore from California, majoring in international affairs. She is the events coordinator for GW for Bernie. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
At a recent Democratic debate, Clinton and Sanders sparred over their voting records, specifically with regard to the bailout of the auto industry in 2008. Let's listen to that.
We just had the best year that the auto industry has had in a long time. I voted to save the auto industry. He voted against the money that ended up saving the auto industry. I think that is a pretty big difference.
Well, if you are talking about the Wall Street bailout, where some of your friends destroyed this economy.
You know.
Excuse me, I'm talking.
Let him respond.
If you're going to talk, tell the whole story, Senator
Let
Sanders.
me tell my story, you tell yours.
I will.
Your story is for voting for every disastrous trade agreement and voting for corporate America.
And that was just one of the many contentious exchanges between the two candidates as of late. So, Brenna, what do you say to those progressives who believe that Secretary Clinton might be too aligned with Wall Street to be the nominee of the Democratic Party?
I mean, I'd say I disagree. You know, in 2007, she actually gave a speech to many Wall Street executives telling them that what they were doing was going to cause a housing bubble and the possible collapse of the housing market, and that they needed to stop doing what they were doing because it was going to hurt so many Americans.
But she also did give paid speeches to Goldman Sachs after her tenure as Secretary of State, right? Do you think she should release those transcripts?
I think she should release the transcripts, but I don't think it's a problem that she gave the speeches. Any Secretary of State, high-profile authority is going to be asked to give those kinds of speeches, and I don't think it's a problem that she gave the speeches. I do think it would help her credibility if she released them.
Keiko, do you think she will release them?
No, there's no way that she'll release them. That wasn't the only speech she gave. She's given many speeches over the years. And I have to say, I think the speeches are besides the point. The point that progressives like me, like many others have with Hillary Clinton, is that she's accepted millions and millions of dollars through her super PACs from the fossil fuel industry, from Wall Street, and we're supposed to believe that she's going to upheld these positions and fight for the American people while she's taking that much money from them.
Do you worry that she might be too close to Wall Street to be the Democratic nominee?
No, I mean, all candidates take money from super PACs. Even Senator Sanders does have a super PAC at this point. And, you know, you have to know how to play the game to be able to reshape it, if you know what I mean.
Keiko, Secretary Clinton has often brought up the feasibility of Senator Sanders' proposals, such as making public colleges and universities tuition-free, among other proposals that he's laid out. She says they're not feasible, they're not realistic, they can't get through a Congress, even maybe a Democratic Congress. Do you maybe see where she's coming from?
I see where she's coming from. Something that I've heard from a lot of pundits and news supporters is that, you know, how does Bernie expect to get this through, you know, if let's say that Congress was still held by the Republicans. But to that I'd say they are so polarizing, they're so obstructionist at this point, then what is there to believe that they wouldn't do the same thing to Hillary Clinton? So I think in this case it's best to vote for, you know, who's going to point us in the right direction as far as our health policy and our education policy, who's going to take those steps in the right direction versus making 5 steps in the wrong one.
You mentioned health care. Senator Sanders has been under fire from Secretary Clinton. She claims he would undo the Affordable Care Act in order to get to universal health care. Do you think that that's the best way to go? Do you think Senator Sanders would undo the Affordable Care Act in order to implement his Medicare for All policy?
Well, let's look at that statement a little bit closer by undo. when Hillary Clinton says undo, she's basically suggesting to the American public that he's going to take away their Obamacare. That is definitely not what he's after. He is advocating for universal single-payer health care. That means that we start treating health care in this nation not as a privilege, but as an actual right. We are one of the wealthiest nations in the world, and we pay the most money for health care. I think that that's absurd, frankly. And I find it ironic because in the 1990s, when she served as First Lady, she also supported a single-payer system. She had to scale that down eventually in order to, kind of get that through Congress, and it didn't go through Congress. But she praised Bernie Sanders for his efforts to fight for free health care.
Brett, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great, single-payer healthcare and trying to get healthcare for all. I think it's a great idea and all, but I think what you need to do is improve on what Obamacare has established, and I think Hillary Clinton would be the best person to do that. She has very detailed plans to get what she talks about done, and that's one of her biggest strengths I actually see in her. And I believe she'd be able to do this because she's not only been in Congress, she's been Secretary of State. She's the only one with actual White House experience, if you think about it. As First Lady, she didn't have, the kind of elected authority that the president would, but she got to see the day-to-day and how it works every day, and how presidential authority is very different from congressional authority, and how she could use that in particular to make the change she talks about.
Speaking of detailed plans on trade, of course, Secretary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, she worked extensively on crafting and negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Right.
But now, seemingly after pressure from Senator Sanders, she doesn't support the TPP anymore. So can you see why there might be a trust issue with her that among some voters?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just kicked that.
That's fine.
So when she came out supporting the TPP, that was back in 2013, 3 years ago, and then she left the Secretary of State position. And I think in that time it has changed a lot, as she has said. She said back in 2013 that she hoped it would be the gold standard of trade agreements. But what it has come to, what it's been turned into, is not been up to her expectations, and I think that's the reason for the change in position on it. I could see why many people would be skeptical, but I think once you listen to what she has to say about it and how it just didn't live up to her expectations of an agreement that would help working and middle-class American people, it's clear that it just didn't live up to her expectations.
Keiko, of course, Secretary Clinton did support NAFTA back in the day as well, and Senator Sanders has called those trade agreements disastrous.
Yes.
What's your take?
Those trade agreements, although they seem kind of obscure to general Americans, these are trade agreements that outsource our jobs overseas. As far as the Trans-Pacific Partnership in general, it's about scaling back several health and safety and labor regulations that are already in place, and it's also about undercutting the labor rights. And so these trade agreements, she has supported them. And although she might have changed her stances when it was politically expedient, I don't see how the American people can actually feel that she would live up to the standards that she now recently set for herself when she's taking millions of dollars from the same people that are telling her to support it.
I want to pivot now to gun control. Senator Sanders does not support taking away immunity from the gun industry if somebody commits a crime using a gun that was bought from a specific dealer. He was even praised by the NRA for that. So why is Senator Sanders seemingly out of step with liberals when it comes to gun control?
So Vermont, first and foremost, he is the representative of Vermont. Vermont has been said to be a gun-friendly state. Keeping that in mind, they still have one of the lowest rates of gun-related crimes. And so I think that he's reflecting the views of his constituency, and that's something that we elect representatives to do. Keeping in mind, although the NRA might have released that comment, I'm not really sure of their motivations for that, but he has a D- rating from the NRA. And I think the attempts to distort his record and make him seem that he's pro-gun or against regulation, I think those are absurd. When he first ran for mayor of Burlington, Vermont, he lost by a tiny fraction of votes because he vouched for a ban on assault weapons. And so I think that insinuating that he won't fight for Americans and gun safety, I feel like that's absurd because he has a D- rating from the NRA, and he's definitely not like that.
Brenna, is Senator Sanders' record on guns in line with liberals?
I don't think it's as far left as it needs to be. You can represent your constituency, but not at the expense of the rest of the American people. We can hold pharmaceutical companies accountable in some cases for wrongful death, but we can't hold gun companies accountable. I think that's absurd. And I think Secretary Clinton's views on that are much more in line with the general progressive view on gun violence prevention.
And finally, before we wrap this up, I want to ask you guys, if your candidate gets the nomination, who should he or she pick as their vice presidential nominee? Keiko, I'll start with you. Who do you think is the best choice for Senator Sanders?
Hands down, Elizabeth Warren. That's something that's always been said, but they policy-wise, they are in line in a lot of areas. And also, I think that she has a very inspirational message for the American people. She has the ability to connect with them on a greater level than previous politicians do. And also, she has a lot of experience. She was a professor. She has a lot of knowledge about economics. And I think that they would complement each other greatly.
Okay, Brenna, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Cory Booker would be great. I think he has a lot of good ideas. I don't think she will pick him. I think she'll probably pick someone more established, but I think in a few years he would be very viable.
I think maybe Julian Castro will get the nod.
Yeah, I think he's a lot more likely in reality.
And one last question. It looks like Donald Trump is going to get the GOP nomination. Are both of you confident that your candidate can beat Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a resounding yes? Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. All right, and with that, we end our debate here on Colonial Crossfire. Thank you so much, Brenna and Keiko, for joining us. And during our panel discussion, a team of fact-checkers has been monitoring our debate. Casey Decker is here to fill us in on what we missed. Casey?
Thanks, Andrew. First, let's look at our Clinton supporter, Brenna. She said that Bernie Sanders now has a super PAC. There's a lot of ambiguity here. A few organizations designated as political action committees support Sanders. However, Sanders has not allied with or sanctioned any of these groups, so while he does receive PAC support, he's not directly affiliated with any super PAC as most other candidates are. Now we'll look at our Sanders supporter, Keiko. She said Sanders lost a race for mayor of Burlington, Vermont because of his support for banning assault weapons. First off, he never lost a mayoral election. He first ran for the position in 1980 and won narrowly. He was later re-elected 3 times. The race in question is actually Sanders' campaign for Congress in 1988. He did narrowly lose that race and has since claimed his support for banning assault weapons was a defining factor. But there is serious debate over the extent to which gun control truly influenced that election. In the 3-man race, the NRA did endorse both of Sanders' opponents and not him. This surely impacted some voters. However, there is no clear evidence the endorsements were the crucial factor. Sanders himself, in 1990, said he was unsure whether the issue was pivotal, and as recently as January has said gun control might not have been the only reason for his loss. That's all for the fact check. Andrew?
All right, thanks, Casey. Well, that's it for this webisode of Colonial Crossfire. For all the latest updates from our political team at any time, be sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. You can also check out all GWTV content on our website at www.gw-tv.com. For all of us here at GWTV, I'm Andrew Desiderio. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you right back here next time.